Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where OP fights to stay in his son's life. Am I the jerk for fighting for my biological son to have my last name instead of his mom and her husband's? I, 24 male, have a 5-month-old son with my ex, 28 female, and things are complicated with her. We dated for 8 months. She left me for her ex and didn't tell me that she was pregnant. It was her sister who told me, and she told me the baby was mine and my ex knew about it. I reached out and told her that I wanted to be a parent to my kid. She retaliated by marrying her ex, and they told me that he was going to be the father. I told them I would file with the courts when the baby was born to establish DNA and custody. My son was born, they did everything to keep me away, including adding her husband to the birth certificate and giving the kid his last name, which at the time of his birth was just the husband's last name. My ex changed hers last month before our court date. They also tried to make my son a junior for the husband, first and middle. But something changed, so his name is another form of her husband's name. DNA proved that I was the father. The judge ordered us to attend 2 mediation and therapy sessions together, me and my ex. We didn't reach an agreement because she was clear she wanted me out of the picture and wanted her husband to raise my son as his own. The judge did not take kindly to that. In my petition to the courts, I said I wanted my son to have my last name, not his stepfather's. The outcome from court was 50-50 physical and legal custody. My son's last name was changed, as was his first name, because her ex-husband was bitter he didn't get his junior in my son. We are to communicate through an app about our son and nothing else. Neither of us pays child support. We both have to make decisions for him. I'm also on the birth certificate now. My ex hates me for all of this, but the sorest point seems to be the last name. Her mom called me and I only met her twice while I was with my ex. But she called me and told me that I was a petty little kid who was playing daddy when her grandson deserved a real man for a father, and he now has one in his mom's husband, and I should have left them to raise him together so he could have the stability of one home. She told me to deny that wonderful man the right to pass his name onto a kid he swore to love as his own is awful, and that my ex, as the mom, should share a name with her child. Then I had one of my ex's friends come up to me while I was out getting groceries, and she called me petty for fighting for my son's last name. My ex also brought it up during our last exchange. She told me she hoped that I was darn proud of myself for fighting over the name when she had her husband's name too, and she wanted it to be their family name, and I denied their son that. She said their son. Am I the jerk? I mean, that sucks, but she's the one who carried the baby, not you. If anything, he should have her last name rather than yours. You didn't carry him for 9 horrible months, but the rest of what she did is pretty crappy. Sorry you're dealing with that. You're the jerk for the specific question of the last name. Her last name is now her husband's. She grew a baby and gave birth to it. Why should the baby have your name instead of his mother's name? A fairer compromise would have been a hyphenated name or her maiden name. I'm super torn on this one because I object to the idea that a baby should get their father's last name by default. It's complicated by the fact that she didn't originally change her last name, but now that she has, it makes it hard for me to decide on this. You're not the jerk on all of the other stuff, fighting for your kid, ensuring you're involved. Kudos to you for being an active and involved dad, but you asked for judgment specifically on the last name piece, so I'm going no jerks here because there really isn't a good answer here. Wow, how messed up can you be? If you don't understand how incredibly selfish you're being in this situation, you're really not fit to be a parent at all. Do you seriously not understand the stress you will put that kid through if he had a name different from the rest of the family? The bullying that will happen to him? Do you really have no clue how that will affect him? Not the jerk, but also everyone sucks here. Neither of you are thinking about the kid's future or how this is going to affect him. She sucks because hiding his true parental lineage is so problematic, especially when it comes to health risks, etc. But for you, I get that he's biologically yours, but socially, why do you want custody? The post hasn't said anything about why you care. To spite your ex? Why do you want to raise a kid in a toxic environment? He's going to have so many issues growing up in such a toxic environment, and I pray for him. OP. Because he's my kid. He deserves to know he was loved and wanted by me, even if the circumstances aren't ideal. You hear about it all the time, where kids end up resentful or lost or feeling abandoned or unwanted because a biological parent chose to not be part of their life. I have friends who went through that, and I know someone who has a very similar set of circumstances. Mom got married when he was very young, and dad decided to let them raise the kid. It messed with his head. The truth always comes out. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his ex? Please let us know. Boss tried to make me work after hours without clocking in. Regretted it the next day. This story is back when I worked at a casino. For anyone out there who thinks that it would be a great job, I can tell you right now it's not as glamorous as it seems, especially when you're working in the kitchen. Backstory. When I started working at this location, I was young, still in college, and working 2 part-time jobs. At first, it was just okay. I had been hired on as a steward, which is just a fancy term for a dishwasher, which wasn't too bad as it had been the same job I had at the last restaurant I worked at. However, there were a few differences. I won't go into too much detail and name all of them, just the ones that are important to the story. The first one, and the one I liked the best, was that since there were so many restaurants and the stewards were all in one department, we were shuffled around every day. One day you would be working in the steakhouse, the next day the buffet, then the Italian, the sandwich shop and the bingo hall, and so on. This meant that you were always working with other people, interacting with them, and giving a change of scenery. I was told I was odd for liking this, but my counter was that if you did end up working with someone you didn't get along with, then it would only be for a little while until you worked with someone else. The second was that this place hated unions. Twice a year, there would be a meeting that everyone had to attend where they would make these long presentations on how evil and manipulative unions were. Also, there would be signs all over the employee hallways with anti-union propaganda. After working for the casino for some time, my boss approached me asking if I wanted to be bumped from part-time to full-time. I said yes, as the benefits were really good. Not only did I get medical and dental insurance, but I would also be getting access to their lawyers as well as a few other things. I guess it was a good thing that I did because a few months later, there were some major shakeups. I didn't know what caused it, but most everyone there hated the new changes. For one thing, the sick note policy was canceled, meaning if you were sick, it wouldn't matter if you had a note from your doctor saying you couldn't work. If you didn't show up, they docked you a point. This resulted in cooks and stewards coming in, getting sick on the floor, and being very sick at work because they couldn't afford to lose a point as it would count against them when it came time for raises. Another thing that changed was that they were cutting the number of full-time employees. I was safe, along with everyone else who had that status, but if any of us left, that slot would not be filled. There would only be 2 full-time employees per department. Speaking of departments, that leads me to the next big change. Technically, the stewarding department would be disbanded. This meant that while our supervisors would still be there, it would be the chefs and managers of the restaurants that would be in charge of us. This also meant that we would no longer be moving around. I was sent to the steakhouse, and thankfully, I had 2 great female coworkers. In fact, we were so good that we were called AAA, as all of our names began with the letter A. As we worked there, I began to plan moving up within the casino. I knew it would be difficult, but I had a dream of buying my family's cabin from my parents and living up in the country when I finished college. Sadly, my first attempt to become a supervisor failed, and I ended up training the person who did get the job. I didn't complain, I just took it as a sign that I needed to up my game. Now, here's where our real story begins. See, our head chef was being transferred to the Italian restaurant and the assistant chef was taking his place, meaning we were going to hire a new guy to take his place. Let's call the new guy Kevin. When Kevin first came in, he seemed okay. Not great or awful. He was just there and we had no real reason to talk most days as we were usually pretty busy. Then, maybe about a month after Kevin started working there, I had my first real interaction with him, and it was something else. It was at night with the dinner rush just starting to pick up, and I told my coworkers that I was going to fill up my water bottle before it happened. They said okay and that they would begin doing the same once I got back. But before I could leave the steakhouse to go to the break room, Kevin called out to me. Kevin.
OP, where are you going?
Me. Just getting a drink before we get busy. I told the girls. Kevin.
Then why aren't you using the waitstaff drink fountain?
Me, blinking and confused. We were told when we started that staff are only supposed to get drinks from the break room. Kevin.
Don't give me that. I see the waitstaff getting drinks there all the time. You're just going there to waste time. I'm going to have to write you up for this.
Me. Wasting time? The break room is just down the hall. In the time we've spent having this conversation, I could have gone down there, filled up my bottle with ice, gotten my drink, and gotten back. Kevin then opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, the head chef caught sight of us standing there and came over to see what was going on. Before I could open my mouth, Kevin spoke up, explaining the whole thing with a superior look on his face. That, however, faded when the chef spoke. Chef.
Kevin, OP is right.
Employees are only supposed to use the drink fountains in the break room.
I guess I'm going to have to talk to the waitress supervisor about this. OP, go get your drink. I need to talk to Kevin in private.
So I did. After that, I was pretty much confused by what just happened. At first, I was willing to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, believing that he honestly didn't know about that rule, that maybe chefs and supervisors were allowed to use the waitstaff station, assuming that it applied to everyone. However, when I brought this up to my coworkers, they said similar things had happened with them, that he had pulled them over for a minor infraction of the rules, and when they just said that they were sorry, he let them off with a warning. So they suggested that he was just marking his territory, and he would have gone easier on me if I hadn't questioned his authority. It was after that, however, that I began to notice things. Firstly, the waitstaff was no longer talking with Kevin, as they were pretty upset with him for getting the crackdowns at their station. It was during this time that I began to realize just how often he hung out with them. He was also always calling over my coworkers, asking them to help with a job like peeling potatoes for hours, leaving me alone. What's more, whenever I stopped to speak with one of my supervisors, who happened to be a young woman, he would yell at me to get back to work. Slowly, I began to suspect that he had other intentions. These suspicions were later confirmed during that summer. For those of you who have never been in a professional kitchen, it can get hot. And in the summer, it can get really hot, and the odors can sometimes overpower you. On this day, I was working at one of our massive sinks, scraping off the remains of perch and giving the pans a deep clean when Kevin called me to the office. Now this was odd, as I had only ever been called to the office to get my 10-cent raises while getting a performance evaluation, and neither of those were to happen until January. Curious, I followed him to the small room where he gestured me to enter first. I did, finding a woman I had never met before sitting at one of the desks there. When I entered, she looked up from her work to give me a curious look that said, "Hello, can I help you?" You know the look. Then Kevin spoke as he shut the door, walking in backwards as he did. Kevin:
OP, you stink.
The woman sitting there said, "Excuse me?" At this, Kevin jumped before turning around. The woman was looking at him with rage, while Kevin looked lost. It didn't take me long to realize that he didn't know she was in the room. Kevin:
Sorry, I misspoke. I meant that he smelled bad. We're getting complaints about his BO.
Now, like I said, the room was small. So small that I felt cramped being in there with two other people. With the way we were positioned, I was pretty close to the woman, who was growing more annoyed. The woman said, "I don't smell anything. Sir, would you mind if I get a little closer?" I said it wouldn't be a problem and allowed her to get close enough to sniff me. She did it maybe 2 or 3 times before pulling away. "I don't smell anything." That's when I spoke up. Me: "Look, if someone said that I smell, then I'm sorry, but I'm working over greasy sinks full of chemicals to clean off pans with fried perch on them in a room that feels like it's 100 degrees. And on top of that, the aprons we were given are not the best." To emphasize my point, I gestured to my shirt, which was wet and full of bits and pieces of fish. The woman: "I see. I'm going to have to take a look at those and see if they need any replacing. OP, how about you cool down for a bit in the break room? Kevin, you stay. We need to have a talk." After that, 3 things happened. The first was that the stewards got new aprons, which made all of us happy as they hadn't been replaced in years. Second, from then on, if Kevin wanted to talk to me about an issue, another staff member had to be there as a witness. And if there wasn't one, I was to find that woman, who I learned was the steakhouse manager. Third, all bets were off between me and Kevin. While he couldn't pull me to the side like that, he did start yelling at me whenever he could in public. If he caught me standing around, like when I was waiting for the dishwasher to fill up, he would yell at me to get back to work from across the room before going back to talk to one of the girls. He would just go off on me for any little thing he could just to make me miserable. Soon, I came to realize that he saw me as an obstacle between himself and all of the female staff members, as I was on good terms with all of them. Over the next year, I tried everything in my power to stop him while still trying to get that supervisor position. I went to HR, writing up complaints, only for them to ask, "What do you want us to do about this?" And when I went to my head supervisor, he just said that I needed thicker skin. It seemed like every day it just got worse. On top of that, my identity was stolen twice. The first targeting my bank account, while the second one was my tax return. With the bank refusing to help and the legal department of the casino dragging their feet to help me, I was in the red for a long time, making my situation all the worse. There would be days when I would have to collect cans in the break room for gas and had to give away one of my cats. And with Kevin adding to my stress, there were days when I honestly thought I couldn't take it anymore. Thankfully, there were good people still around. A bunch of my coworkers got together to give me small packs of food, and some of the line cooks helped sneak out some meats that they were about to throw away. Then came the big night. It had been a concert night on one of the coldest nights of the year, so cold that several keys had snapped in the door locks because they had frozen shut. I had managed to get to my car and turn it on, leaving it running for a couple of minutes as I headed back to the locker room in order to enjoy my only comfort left, a book. The plan was to just read a couple of pages and then I would be out of there. But before I could get past my first paragraph, the doors to the locker room opened and there strode in Kevin. He looked around for a moment before his eyes fell on me and a wicked smile appeared on his face. Kevin:
Who told you could punch out, OP? Not me, that's for sure. I just got a complaint from the night crew saying that your dishwasher is a mess. Clearly you didn't clean it all. Now go back there and clean it right now, and I'd better not see you punching in, or else you'll be fired.
With that, he strode out of the room, laughing. For a moment, I just sat there in utter confusion, wondering if he could do that. I felt scared because if I lost my job, then I wouldn't know what to do. I was behind on my student loans. I had to drop out of college by this point due to various reasons, behind on paying my parents' rent, and could barely afford to keep the one cat that I had left. For the first time in years, I felt so overwhelmed with fear that I felt like I could begin crying at any moment. Then the moment passed and I was furious. This guy had been doing this to me for too long. It didn't matter if he could or couldn't. I was done with this. I had to get out of there. As I stood up, I found myself making a plan fueled by my rage. I had kept the fact that my identity had been stolen from my parents, partly out of shame and partly out of pride, as I wanted to get myself out of this mess. Well, no more. I was going to tell them about it and ask if I could move back in with them. I would even ask for help looking for a new job down there. Sure, it would mean losing my dream home in the country, but at this point, being stable was more important. But before I could do anything, another thought crossed my mind, making me smile. He wanted me to wash the dishwasher right now without punching back in? Okay, I'll do just that. So I left the locker room, barely hearing the security guard stationed nearby as he called out to me. No, I ignored him and everyone else as I mentally prepared myself to do this. When I got to the kitchen, there were piles of dishes, pots, pans, and a slew of other items that needed to be cleaned in quantities that are only ever seen on concert nights. But I ignored that, as well as the 3 stewards who were working hard, shutting down the machine and emptying it. Night steward: What are you doing? Me: Sorry, but Kevin told me that you had told him no one had cleaned the dishwasher and that it was a mess. So much so that I had to come back and clean it without punching in, or else I'd be fired. The color on everyone's faces drained. When the first person managed to compose himself, he told me that none of them had seen Kevin and that the machine was perfectly clean when they arrived. Now, hearing this did make me feel as what I was doing would put them behind. But Kevin told me to do this, so I was following it to the letter, while also making sure everyone knew who had sent me. Seeing that I wasn't going to stop, not that it mattered at this point as the machine had been drained, one of them went to get the night supervisor. While he was gone, the other 2 began to argue with each other over whether or not Kevin could order us to stay past our shifts and fire us if we refused. It didn't help that the casino had this nasty habit of offering employees a room to stay in when the roads were snowed over, only to make them work all night as they were on call. When the night supervisor got there, she asked me what was going on. I repeated my story while cleaning the machine. She said that Kevin had not spoken to her and was gone before stating that he doesn't have the power to fire me. I just told her that I really couldn't take the chance. Then I asked her how to put in my 2-week notice. That confused her even more, asking why I was doing this if I was just planning on leaving anyways. I told her that I would need time to make arrangements for my future and that getting one last paycheck was important. So I wrote up my 2-week notice, even mentioning why I was leaving before hitting the road. When I got home, it was 3 a.m., and with all the rage now out of my system, I just crashed onto my bed with my uniform still on. The next morning, I was awoken to the sound of my phone ringing. It was the casino. The head stewarding supervisor was asking if I could come in and talk about last night. At first, I told him no, that I couldn't come in early just to come back home. However, he said it was important. Curious, I told him I would be there in an hour or 2. When I arrived, I was taken back to the steakhouse office to find it crammed with people. The night supervisor was still there, the night security officer was there, my supervisors were there, several head chefs, and the steakhouse manager. She looked like her face would erupt into flames at any moment as she stared at one person who was sitting there. It was Kevin, hunched over in his seat, looking like a kid who had been put in timeout. I was then told that they knew what happened. After I had my talk with the night supervisor, she went to security and found footage of Kevin looking out the door before heading towards the locker room and finishing off with him leaving with a grin minutes before I left the room. After that, she called in Kevin to show up the next morning. He tried to lie his way out of this, stating that it never happened and I was just trying to get him into trouble. The supervisors then said that it was a simple matter to check as they have the security guard that was by the room and that they can check the footage. Instantly, he remembered that he had spoken to me, only I had misheard him and that he would never tell me to work without punching in. The night supervisor and the others in the room then asked, "Why would OP lie? Who told you the machine needed cleaning? Why would he be the only one who needs permission to leave?" And so on. Over and over, Kevin tried to lie, only to change his story again and again, until finally, he realized he had been caught. The steakhouse manager then turned to me before apologizing, asking me if I would consider staying. The head manager also apologized, asking the same. For a moment, I was going to say no, but then I had a stupid idea. That if I did this, then I might have a shot at becoming a supervisor myself and not having to leave. So I said sure, but only if Kevin never talks to me again. If he has a problem with what I'm doing, he'll have to run it by the head chief unless it's an emergency. They agreed. Later, I heard a few stories on why they finally acted. The first and least likely in my opinion was that this incident finally caused someone higher in the food chain to notice all of the written complaints I had on Kevin and was demanding answers. The second was that they didn't want to lose me just yet. Remember how I said that they used to move around from area to area? Well, turns out there were now only 2 employees who knew how to work in every restaurant, meaning I could go into any area and know instantly where everything goes and how that area operates without wasting anyone's time. But the most likely reason was due to the union. News about what had happened the night before had spread throughout the casino faster than I ever could have imagined, and if they didn't take care of this, there was a greater chance that the union reps would seize on it. In the end, I stayed in the steakhouse longer than Kevin did, as he left 2 years later. But before he did, I offered to throw a pizza party for everyone the day after he left. Am I the jerk for not telling my parents that the event they were missing was my wedding? So I, 27 female, have a younger brother, Mike, who's 21. He's the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him, just overall a real jerk. Ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything, and my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 50 female especially, she went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, who's 50, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood up for me was my grandpa, who's 76. He always called out my parents on their BS and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country and I couldn't see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and he loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human being. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things that he framed me with. His only talent is his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because apparently my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that said money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It was at public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to there. Of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now to the main issue. Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything, and when I told my parents, they dismissed it with a, "That's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. And whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows, and both my high school and university graduations for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely omitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas' family, and our friends were all there, and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said that they had my brother's game to attend and they couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, But otherwise, nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon, and we were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a storm was welcoming us home. I turned my phone on and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go off on them, shaming my father, his son, to the point of tears. And this seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages, at first insulting and threatening, and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea that this is what was going on. But my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding, because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely sad and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on 3 fronts. The majority, who is sticking by my side, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Actions have consequences. Mike is the golden child to the point of things being dysfunctional. You've created your life accordingly based on what they have done. Your mom controlling everything and your dad enabling her. And now they're unhappy because they've been shamed for it. I am, however, pleased your dad might be waking up. Please give a hug or a high five to Mr. Grandpa from me for the star that he is. You go and live your best life where people value you. Also, congratulations to both you and your husband. You've done absolutely nothing wrong. I, 39 male, found out that I'm literally the backup to my pregnant fiance, and I walked out. Now she's begging me to come back. We first met 6 years ago at my then job, and we were just colleagues back then. I split up with my ex 4 years ago roughly, and we started seeing each other casually 3 years ago until she asked me if we could give it a go at a serious relationship just over 2 years ago. A lot has happened in the past 2 years. She had a preventive double mastectomy due to having the breast cancer gene. We both sold our respective houses, moved in together, got pregnant, and I proposed 6 months ago. She's been telling me in the past few months she's so in love with me, can't wait to start our family, and even wants more kids with me. We only planned to have this one, but because she's so happy, we were even saying she was thinking about having another kid straight after our first is born, so we could start our family before she has a hysterectomy due to the gene. So she went on maternity last week, and we have 2 weeks to go before our baby is born. My phone died a few days ago, so I asked her if I could use one of her old phones until my new one came. She said of course, and told me which one, and said it should be empty really. Important thing to note here is that she actually has 2 of the same make, but different models, so by mistake, I grabbed the wrong one and logged in, and said, "Oh, I thought it was blank." She said without thinking she must be baby-brained again, so to do what I want and delete anything I don't need. After a short while, I start going through the phone and see that she has conversations with her bestie in there, and the last dates were just before we committed to each other. Basically, she was talking to her and literally weighing up all of her options about who she should have kids with before it's too late, and she was going over her backups, and I saw their chat about me. Basically, the consensus was I was the shortest and oldest of her guys she was seeing, but I had the best prospects, most stable job, best personality, most common interests, funny, and good looking, even if I'm not her usual type. So she said she was going to give it a go, and her friend encouraged her. Then I guess we started dating. The messages stopped when she was starting to go through her mastectomies and got a new phone. I was just like, "What the heck, babe?" out loud, and she initially was clueless but realized which phone I had. She was mortified and she was spiraling trying to explain herself but not making much sense. I literally told her to just shut up, grabbed my stuff and I walked out. I've booked into a B&B and I've been staying here for a couple of days now. She's been messaging me, sending video messages, literally begging me to come home, crying so we can talk. I can't face it. I feel so humiliated and used. I've gone from the happiest I've been in years to feeling like my last couple of years is a bit of a lie. I keep going through the messages on one hand and thinking of how she's been acting the past few months, telling me how much she's in love with me, how happy she is, she wouldn't change the past couple of years, and how much she's looking forward to us starting a family together. Saying things like she has an actual crush on me, even just sending me texts with hearts on them. I literally don't know what to do. Do I go back and talk? Or wait it out until she has the baby, then go back and discuss it then? I'm a literal mess, Reddit. Edit. You're all right. I shouldn't just walk out and leave her while she's so vulnerable. I'm going to go home at least and be with her until the baby is here, and we'll see what happens then. Can't say I know how I'll feel long term about this and what will happen next, or that I'm happy, but we'll tackle it when it comes. My husband asked me out because he thought I would be a good supportive wife and didn't fall for me until after we were dating. When I found out, I was so upset. It really doesn't matter. I love him, he loves me. I don't have any doubts about our relationship. I understand that you would be embarrassed or upset, but how you started out doesn't invalidate your current relationship. My guy, did you read what you actually wrote? She thinks you have the best personality, funny, you're good looking, even though you're not her normal type. And that was before you made an actual commitment. Now, 2 years on, she's so in love with you, incredibly happy, and can't wait to have kids with you. To the point she's planning your second before your first is even here. And you're angry because she thought through her options before making a commitment to you? She compared you to other people she was also dating at the time. She talked to the people she trusts before making a huge decision? She hasn't done anything wrong, and you're letting your insecurity blind you. You're interpreting this as humiliation because she brought up things you feel insecure about, when what actually happened was that she chose you for all of the great qualities she always knew you had. You have a great relationship by your own account with someone who loves you and a new baby on the way. Why are you even thinking about throwing all of that away? I've reread my old journals occasionally for nostalgia. It's like those entries are written by a stranger. Don't put too much stock into it. Go back to your pregnant fiance and talk to her. You feel so humiliated and used? It's because you were. Don't be someone's safe option because they will jump ship the moment something better appears on the horizon. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.